Okay, we're live. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Um, so let's see. So it wants us to start kind of imagining that we are bankers. So like we're some of the bankers, and we're sitting there in the Super Saturday interview setup, and that we are to vote on which two candidates we should hire. So what candidates would you hire out of the four that it gave us?
So I liked Andy Sanchez and is it Natalia?
Oh,
Um, Natalia.
like Godlewek or something like that. The like Russian born one. Yeah. And I guess like what kind of things pull you to those two candidates? Like what makes you like them the most?
Um, so I like Natalia because she has good experience. Um, and she seems like a go-getter. She seems like she, is gonna be a hard worker and is gonna, you know, I don't know, be committed. So I liked that. Um, I think that, basically her only con was that she wasn't a native English speaker, which I think is not a reason.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like that's a typically like depending on how bad it is, minor inconvenience, but also like with some of the assets that she brings to the table and kind of some of their goals. And like with the whole merger stuff that's been going on in the industry, I'd think that like her multilingual background actually would probably be a pretty big benefit to some of their goals.
yeah, I agree. So,
Right.
yeah, that was the main reason why I chose her. Andy Sanchez, I liked him. Um, their main thing was that he had a low GPA, but he was also running his own business and building his business at the same time.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a valid reason for not having a 4.0.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I mean, he had a really pretty successful business, so um, he knows how to do that. Um, and they're looking, depending on, they're looking for entrepreneur types, and so clearly he fits that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of why I liked him.
Yeah, I agree. Andy was one of my picks as well. I'd choose Andy, and then also I actually liked Ken Goldstein a lot.
Yeah, I liked him too.
Yeah, I just thought like I mean personally I think that there are reasons being like well he has a family like we don't know if we want to hire him. Seems like I don't know. That seems like it's very subjective. It's not really I mean at least in a legal standpoint especially like it's not really grounds for not hiring somebody.
Right.
That could be considered discriminatory because there's just all kinds of stuff around that. But like you, in my opinion, if that's kind of like, well, I don't think that person will be as committed because they have a family, isn't necessarily a valid reason. All the other work experience he brings, I think, is like really top notch. Um, and he's like a good long term candidate for them.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, with Andy, I also actually I agree a lot with like what you said, like the fact that he had his own business going, like a successful business nonetheless. Um, I think that speaks like volumes, and then also like his testing was really good. So like clearly he's not like a slouch. He is a very sharp guy. He's really smart, knows what he's doing. His GPA isn't the greatest, but I mean personally as well, I don't think GPA is necessarily the best reflector of a
Right.
person's intelligence or capacity anyway. So
Exactly. It's how well are you at passing classes?
yeah. Well, and they're also looking for self starters, which somebody who went out and started their own company and figured out how to start that up,
Yeah.
turn it into something profitable. To me, nothing says that they're a self starter more than that.
Yeah. I agree.
So, and then like if you just had any reasonings for the other two not being hired, like did you have any like in particular that stood out?
Um, Not really. I don't know. Martin Street, I just didn't really, I don't know. He just didn't really seem, from what little is here, I'm like, well, that doesn't really stand out at all.
Yeah,
So,
I'd kind of second that. Like he definitely out of all the candidates did stand out the least. Like he just kind of seemed to have like, I mean, like an MBA is not nothing, but compared to the other candidates who have like work experience backgrounds and stuff like that, yeah, like kind of what has he done to stand out?
yeah. Um, yeah, I guess kind of the only thing with Ken that, because I was kind of torn between the two of him and Natalia.
Yeah,
Um, but I did kind of agree of, okay, is he going to dislike taking orders? And I think I don't necessarily think that's a reason not to hire him. I think it's a reason to dig deeper and ask some more questions and like behavioral interview type questions, um, to kind of gauge where he is on that. But I don't know. I kind of have that situation going on in my job right now where it's like, our supervisor is younger. I mean, he's not young, he's like 30.
yeah,
But, most of the employees are older in their, 40s and 50s. And they have a hard time letting him be in charge. So, I have seen that where it can be an issue, especially since he's been in a place of, being the boss.
yeah.
So
I can totally see that.
that
It's
was
like,
really my only reason.
yeah, when it came down to like Ken and Natalia, to me it was like a tough decision. The only reason that like I didn't feel like there was really anything that like was that made me like read it and be like Natalia wouldn't be like a good hire. Um, it just to me seemed like I don't know, like I think that like kind of that maturity and experience in the field is a big asset, and I think that's kind of the only reason I chose Ken um,
Yeah,
over Natalia. I don't think there was really anything that was like she's at like the bottom of the list. It just kind of he had slightly more on the list.
yeah, yeah, I can agree with that.
I liked it too. Um, so like, wants us to talk a little bit about the um, if there's like any information that we thought would have been useful in making like the decision to like hire one of them.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really feel like there's a ton of information that we're given,
Yeah.
really. It's just like, here's this person, and that's about it. I don't.
I think you kind of actually like hit it a little bit where you were like that like is maybe room to ask more questions.
Yeah,
Like there's some parts where it's like, well, you know, can we talk to that person more about that or something like that?
yeah, and they're just. I feel like they're kind of making assumptions of, oh, well, she might be hard to work with because she, has an accent, or because she is, you know, I don't know,
Right.
like aggressive. That's not the word I want to say, like assertive or something.
Yeah.
Or, oh, he's not going to be willing to work long hours because he has a family. And,
Right.
it's just like they're kind of making these assumptions instead of asking and finding out. And yeah, that maybe that is the case, but you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Here, I'll be back just one second. I'm gonna just
okay,
pause the recording. We're recording again.
okay,
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, just I think there's room to just delve in a little bit more. Like, especially when they're looking for cultural fits, that seemed to be kind of a common theme, is they wanted people who could fit in and work well with their teams.
right,
Um, and so yeah, I think that there's definitely room to like delve in. Like, you got to really find out if you're going to be basing some of your decisions. You have to find out how this person really is rather than assuming some of those.
Yes, I agree.
Um, and so then we got to talk a little bit about like the interview process. Um, they want to know, why is there so much disagreement between the senior bankers in the Saturday meeting?
Um, well, I think part of the reason is what we were talking about before of it's just, yeah, the criteria isn't super clear. Like they don't really, they weren't asking questions for specific reasons. It was just kind of like, okay, here are these people, who do you like? And so of course there's going to be a lot of disagreement because everyone's going to have a different opinion on that.
Yeah.
So I just feel like they could do a better job of, getting facts and getting a full picture of the candidates instead of just like, yeah, here are these people from these schools that we like, and
Yeah.
then just decide.
I think a little bit of their disagreements too came from the fact that their hiring requirements, it seemed like they wanted them to fit good in the specific team that they would be working with, but they also wanted them to be a good fit for every team in the whole company. And so to me, that seems like you're asking for the perfect candidate. Like, can they be good every single place that we could possibly put them? And, like in a growing company or something that's starting to gain some traction, I don't think that's necessarily always possible. And I think that kind of, you know, makes some problems there as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you need to hire for the position, not, hey, can they do everything? Because, yeah, you're right. No one's gonna, that's not really gonna work.
Yeah. Do you think part of it is because of the interview process or like the types of interviews that they're going through?
Um, I think that's part of it. I think, um, I mean, do we even have samples like of the questions that they ask them, or is it?
Mm, it didn't really give us like the sample questions. I think like in there, like might have mentioned like once or twice, kind of like stuff that they might ask, like, would you be good, or would you be comfortable like moving and like living and working in New York? Like was kind of one that they had
Yeah,
mentioned. Um,
yeah. And he has this kind of evaluation sheet,
yeah,
but you know, his how he answers that, I don't really know where he, you know, what questions he's asking to make those ratings, I guess.
yeah, and like looking at how they do it, like I don't think it really gives them that time. Like it's a very intensive process. And I personally don't have any kind of problem with like them establishing some kind of metric, and like I think the way that they collaborate their information through the interviews is a good way to like kind of run them through everybody. Because I think, when you get more eyes on something, then you can really see the benefits and the pros and cons behind it. So I think that part of their process is really good. Um, I almost feel like some of their hiring process might be a little off in the fact that they try to do that super Saturday. As I was reading it, that to me sounded like kind of one of their main problems is trying to cram everything into one day. Like, all right, we're going to sit down, we're going to go through a grueling schedule, have everybody interviewed, and then we're going to sit down and not leave until we have it figured out.
Yes, I totally agree with that because, of course, especially when it's the senior bankers that have to come in on a Saturday, which they don't want to be there anyway,
Right.
then yeah, it's not going to be a positive experience. And yeah, it's just like, okay, it's snowing, like let's just hurry and get there. And that's not a great way to hire people. I feel like I've also worked for companies like, and I mean, this is a different situation for sure because they are hiring for the next year and they're
Right.
proactive about that. But, it's like, oh crap, we need someone tomorrow. Like, let's hire someone. It's like, well, no wonder you have high turnover here. You're always just hiring in crisis.
Definitely.
So I kind of feel like that Super Saturday has a bit of that in it, of just like, okay, let's just get this done.
Yeah.
Whereas if they did it, you know, maybe took turns and had, you know, the senior partners, I don't know. I don't know another way to do it. Maybe just um, spreading it out throughout a few weeks or something.
Yeah, I think like maybe keeping the interview process, like doing all the interviews in one shot to me seems like the best way to do it because you have people coming from different places and you want to interview them with multiple people. So the best way, in my opinion, is to kind of do that.
Yeah,
But the part that I think should probably be held like a different day, like hold it the next week or something, is the part where they sit down and figure out who they're going to hire. Because to me, that's the part where they're the most stressed out, they're the most tired, and they all
right.
want to get home. There's snow going on, and I mean, I'm a big fan of sleeping on it. You know, if you have big decisions to make, like think
Yes.
about it, sleep on it, give it a little bit of time to think, and then you can come to the table with probably some more clear ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, and then it gives you that time to, you know, kind of, yeah, think about, oh, actually, I really did like this person, and
Hmm.
their answer here, and, you know, well, let's get this clarified, and then they could call them and say, hey, like one more question, or
Yeah,
whatever. They'd be able to. Yeah, I agree with that. I like that idea of sleeping on it and having the information gathering time, and then um, coming back and making a decision at
yeah.
another time.
Well, and it gives the candidates time to follow up too, because like to me, it would feel kind of crappy if like I sent an email the next morning, like, "Hey, thanks for your chance, like to interview, like, you know,
Yeah,
I
looking
I felt
forward to hearing from you, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
like maybe I got a little sidetracked on one of your questions, like I should have spent a little more time talking about like this thing that I did, you know, like it gives people a chance to actually follow up, give them some courtesy because who knows, maybe one of the people that they thought like, wow, that was really stellar, they don't even follow up, and that kind of taints their interview a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good solution. I agree with that.
Um, yeah, so like other than I think getting away from traditional interviews is kind of hard, and like I'm personally a fan of like a traditional interview.
Yeah,
Um, Not necessarily that it has to be like here's my list of questions and you just hit them with questions and see how well they perform against them, but getting to really meet somebody and talk with them
yeah,
and just get a feel for them, they get a feel for you, because the interview should be like a two-way process where they figure out if the company's the right fit for them, and then you find out as a company if they're the right fit within you in your business.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. um let's see. um we kind of already talked about it. It says, how do senior bankers know what they're supposed to be looking for in a candidate? How could this be improved? Um, in some ways, it's like a little bit clear because I feel like they have that sheet. Do you feel like they had like a really clear expectation of what to be looking for in their interviews, though?
Um, Kind of, not necessarily. I think that, yeah, I think they kind of were just looking for someone that they liked,
Yeah.
and that's good and that's important, but that's not necessarily means that they're the best person for the job. The best person for the job may be someone that you're not going to be best friends with, you know. So
It's
I
true.
think I think that they, you know, and maybe that wasn't. Of course, I don't think they were looking at like, oh, who, you know. But yeah, I think it could have been a little bit more clear of like, okay, we need someone whose strength is in building a business. We need someone whose strength is mergers and acquisitions, and you know, so kind of just, I don't know, and maybe they did, and we just don't have that information. But I do think that they could have been a little bit more clear of, okay, we're looking for these 5 criteria.
Yeah. And it's kind of like it, as you were talking too, it's like, how do you define fit? Like we talked the other week about, like, when you hire somebody, you should be able to justify it on paper or writing. Like, you should be able to document why you hired them. And if you just say, like, well, they just seem to fit, like, okay, well, how do you define fit?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, what
Exactly.
does that mean? How can you quantify that?
Yeah, you really can't. And then, and that's also just kind of, that's a pretty slippery slope to discrimination. Like we were talking about last week.
Yeah, that's
Just
true.
like, well, they weren't a good fit. Well, why? Well, they weren't white. Of course, that's not what they're gonna say, but that's their real reason.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah. Anyway, so I think, yeah, there's probably room for them to fix up, like, their actual interview process a little bit.
yeah, you say, okay, these are the things we're looking for and why.
Because I think the big part is, like, trying to unify their like senior bankers kind of behind a common goal, because it does kind of feel like they're all fractured behind their idea of who they should hire, but they're trying to do it together. So
Right.
yeah.
And that's what makes the Super Saturday so cumbersome. It's just like, well, I want this person. Well, I want this person.
Right.
And if they had a more clear criteria of, you need someone who's good with X, Y, Z, then it'd be more quantifiable, like you said.
Yeah. Then there's also, like, the recruiting. It's like, wants to know, like, why was the choice of, like, recruiting schools so important to their company?
Honestly, I don't really know. I think maybe just kind of prestige. They wanted to be known as one of the best. They wanted to, you know, have that brand recognition, that name of we hire from these top schools. So that's really the only reason I can think of. And I mean, and yeah, they're top schools for a reason because they have top students. Um, but I don't know.
I think it was actually, like, a really smart move for them to decide, like, hey, let's try not to recruit out of the top 10 schools anymore, to kind of move it.
Yes.
They're like, well, we could get the middle of the pack out of the top schools, or we could get the cream of the crop out of, like, maybe the ones that are still super good schools, but just not like the Harvards and Princetons and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I thought that was definitely a good move. Kind of like a big fish, small pond kind of thing,
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting because, like, I think their core school strategy, I think it kind of has pros and cons. Like, it allows them to focus a lot more on some certain schools. So, like, for each school that they're at, they can spend a lot of time recruiting there and establish a really good recruitment program. But I think at the same time, they could be passing up some really, really good talent outside of those schools.
Yes, I agree with that.
Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting because, like, being in the economics department, so I was involved in the investment society.
Hmm.
The professor who, like, is in charge of that, and he teaches some of the economics classes, like, he was part of, like, the Federal Reserve stuff, and, like, on the board. And so he's like, super smart guy. He knows exactly what he's doing. But he's really developed the program here at BYU Idaho, um, to where it's, like, actually a pretty high end program. And I just think it's really interesting because I think when most people think of, like, BYU Idaho, they don't think of, like, top end programs, and, like, not necessarily that we are the best in the country,
Right.
but University of Utah, they actually like BYU, like, recruiting for grad school. They actually will prioritize BYU Idaho people above their own undergraduates getting into the master's
Oh,
program because, like, they like it. They're at Utah State. They like the program that they set up. And
yeah.
I just think that there is some value in, like, looking at maybe some places and, like, kind of casting the net a little bit wider, you know,
Yes,
broadening the scope a little.
I agree. Well, and it's also, yeah, like you were saying, and it definitely depends on, who's running the program. Because, yeah, even at these Ivy League schools, there are going to be programs that are better and programs that aren't really as great, So,
Yep.
like, you have to look at the specific program and the specific program director, like you were saying. And that's the same thing too, like with UVU. It's like for pre-med, UVU is better than BYU.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's totally program specific. So it's like, hey, this school that we normally wouldn't really look at is producing these top-notch people. You should, yeah.
Yeah. So like
Don't let your bias get in the way of like, well, they're not a good school.
yeah. Well, because then they're specifically targeting like their programs too. But it's kind of interesting because some of their people also came from like different backgrounds. Like their guy who's in charge of the recruiting right now, he's came from like a law background. Like he was a lawyer before he moved into banking.
Yeah.
It's like even within and without of programs, there's a lot of potential that you could be looking at. Like, you know, it's kind of hard to pigeonhole people in programs.
Yeah, I agree.
In fact, that's actually like the next question. Um, it's like asking whether they should be looking into other programs. Like, should they be recruiting out of like law or technology or just different, you know, degree types?
I mean, it kind of, I can see both sides on this one. Like, what we were talking about definitely applies, but at the same time, you can't just look everywhere because otherwise you're just you're never going to be able to make a decision because you're just going to be constantly be looking,
Yeah,
So it's like you kind of have to have a cutoff point somewhere. So
I'd agree. Yeah, like I can just imagine like being in an ag business, like that one, you know, an ag business, like the program where I'm at, and then
mhm.
they come from like the medical field, and they're like, hey, like we're recruiting for like school, you know, graduate degrees and stuff. Like we wanted to recruit your program. Like maybe every once in a while there might be somebody, but like the chances and odds are pretty dang low.
Right.
So like I'd agree. Like not that there isn't maybe some value there, but how much effort are you going to have to put in to find it? Might not be worth it.
Yeah. But I think maybe if they came to you and they applied, then take a closer look at it and be like, okay, why? And don't just dismiss it out of hand because no, we don't look at that. We don't deal with that.
Yeah,
But as far as active recruiting, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea.
I'd agree with that. I think that's really smart. Just kind of when they come to us, we'll look at them,
Yeah.
or you know, keep an eye for people on the radar. Um, so yeah, what are some of like the pros and the cons of their approach to recruiting on campus? I feel like we kind of already covered it. Like it allows them to kind of, you know, really focus a lot of effort on one spot, but at the same time, they kind of might be ignoring some places that have some potential recruit.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I do think it's a good, it's a symbiotic relationship, between the companies and the schools, because the schools can say, hey, we get a lot of hires from these top companies, and that's a benefit to them, and then the companies are getting benefit because they have a good pool of candidates to hire from, and so it just kind of goes in a circle, which is a good thing. And so you know so it's going to attract people who are interested in working at those types of companies. um, so I think that's one of the biggest pros of just like you know it builds a good reputation on both sides.
It's true. Yeah,
But
a lot of times that'll go farther than kind of anything else. Like it's in the business world, it's mostly about relationships. You know, if you can build a professional relationship with somebody, like
yeah,
that's gonna yield a lot.
yeah, and job placement, or at least the opportunity for job placement afterwards, or so just like, okay, here's your degree, good luck, you know.
Yeah,
So,
no joke. That would be scary.
yeah,
Um, okay, I think we can kind of move on to the
yeah.
Super Saturday stuff because it wants to know like what are the objectives of Super Saturday. We
Um,
talked about those a little bit. I feel like
yeah, just hiring people basically is the objective.
yeah, yeah, trying to do it as efficiently as possible. You know, they're trying to really crank it out. And you know, personally, I think it's kind of a drawback if we're talking about some of the like their conflicts like within their objectives. They're trying to make it as efficient as possible, but I think it almost could be more efficient if they did split up their Saturday a little bit, like we had talked about.
Yeah,
You know, because you can reach a certain point, like whether you're arguing with somebody or whatnot, like you could be just sitting there and everyone's just banging their head against the wall because no one wants to change their mind and they're tired and grumpy.
right.
You just give them a little bit of time, and that kind of speeds it up.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, and the other thing is, do they conflict with their own? That's kind of like what we were talking about. It's like, well, we want someone with a great fit, but um, also who can do all of these jobs, So it's kind of like that kind of conflicts as well. Yeah. Do you want the right person, or do you want someone who fits? And maybe sometimes you can have both, but sometimes
Yeah,
it's okay to pick someone because they are a really good fit, and they may not be the strongest candidate as far as experience or that goes, but if they're willing to work and learn, then that may be a really great hire because you can kind of mold them to what you want them to be.
it's true. You have to kind of like line it up with like what your objectives are of the company, and maybe that's one thing that they fail going into these meetings with is that they don't necessarily have like a clear like okay here's like what we're trying to do as a company, here's the kind of people, here's the attributes that we're looking for out of people, so pay attention for this when you're hiring, you know, when you're doing your interviews, because that's what we want. Because then they get to the end and they have these different people who are all individually good candidates, but what would really stand each candidate apart is a goal. You know, if they're like, we want to try to expand over to Europe, like, well, cool, we have someone who can speak German, Russian, and Polish, like maybe that would be a good fit for expanding over there. Like,
Right.
oh, hey, we're trying to start up this new division or something like that. Well, hey, we have an entrepreneur. Maybe we can put him into it. You know, I think that that would probably really make their time more worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, let's see. I think they gained, like, also they gained a lot of really good. I do think it is a good process for gaining information, like getting kind of their finger on the pulse of everyone that they are considering. I think it's a good thing sometimes to see everyone all at the same time.
Yeah,
Partially because then the interviewers are in the same mood. It's the same day for them. Like if you interview somebody one day and then you come to work the next week and something terrible has happened for the company, you might not be in the mood to interview somebody or give them the time of day, and that I don't think is necessarily 100% fair to the second candidate if they just
yeah.
if they're an
That's
unfortunate.
very true. There's so many yeah, unconscious bias of, yeah, and just factors that you don't really think are factors, but
Yeah,
yeah, we're emotional creatures. It's not, we can't just have the same reaction every day. So yeah, I agree. That's a really good point.
yeah. Um. Okay. And then just kind of moving into this is the wrap up part. It just wants us to kind of think like if is there really a difference between recruiting and hiring, and if so, like what do we think it is?
Um, I don't know. I mean, obviously, recruiting is just kind of getting your pool of candidates, and hiring is giving one person the job, or three people the job, whatever, however many.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, they definitely go hand in hand. Um, there are companies that don't really do a whole lot of recruiting and just hire, you know, but I don't really know. I don't have a very specific answer of what the difference is.
Yeah, I think they're just kind of both parts of the same process, really. Like recruiting is the company looking, hiring is the act of, signing somebody up.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I'd say like learning, like from this case, like the things that I learned about recruiting is the fact that it definitely like is a conscious effort for the company. Companies don't want to take a risk. Just blindly hiring people is not a very good idea. And so companies out there are willing to put a lot of time, money, and effort into making sure that they are pulling in the people who would be the best fit for their company.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And also just that, yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was going to say. Sorry.
All right. Um, Other than that, I think that's pretty much the end of our discussion. Um,
Okay.
Unless you have any like final thoughts or anything like that that is
No,
kind of
I thought it was, I just think it's interesting. I'm finding the stuff we're learning about in this class pretty interesting. It's just kind of the process of how companies do these things. And um, yeah, and of course it's easy to say, well, we would do this and this and this differently, but
yeah.
um, you know, that's not the real world. So
I'd agree. Like there's a whole lot of things in motion when you get in the real world.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we can call it there. If that
Okay.
seems like we've had a good discussion so far.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we get Derek back next week.
I know
Our group keeps shrinking.
it is. It's tiny now. So, all right. Well, we will see you next week, I suppose.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. See ya.
All right, see ya.